Greetings, gamers! Welcome, welcome, welcome to yet again another tier list. I actually, upon further study, only have tier lists planned for two more games, and those would be the Tellius games. So, unfortunately, there's only 8 games in the Fire Emblem franchise that I personally enjoy playing, and that would be obviously Thracia, Genealogy, Echoes, Sacred Stones, Shadow Dragon. Then you have Blazing Blade, and then the Tellius games, Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn. And that's pretty much it. I will play Binding Blade, but I feel like that game is so very flawed that the only games that are worse than it of the original Fire Emblem games and of the pre-bastardization is FE1, 2, and 3. And very frankly, I'll never even play FE1, 2, and 3. And it has to do with how slow they are, how functionally just not great they are. Maybe down the line I could see myself playing the original Shadow Dragon on the Switch because there was that limited release, and I did happen to scoop it up. So I have the original FE1 translation, which is very cool in my humble opinion. I think that's cool that they actually decided to do that. I would potentially play that, but the issue is Shadow Dragon is just infinitely better than that game. Infinitely better than that game. So the issue is that I kind of see that overlap, and I'm just like, the only reason why I would be playing that game is out of novelty. FE6 kind of feels the same way to me. It's basically like they were trying to make Jugdral-sized maps, Genealogy-sized maps, Thracia-sized maps in a handheld functional console. I think that FE7 and FE8 did this way better. They just did Fire Emblem way better handheld, especially FE8. FE8, I don't care what anybody says, is leagues and bounds the best handheld Fire Emblem we've ever had when it comes to the GBA. Because I do think that Echoes is at least on par, if not better, and that's because it did a lot of cool things, like, for instance, giving me faith and hope that Fire Emblem isn't just a dead series, that the older games can be renewed without having to be totally bastardized and butchered themselves. So, without further ado, I'm moving on to my Fire Emblem 7 tier list, the Blazing Blade, or the Blazing Sword. And my tiers are S, necessary, A, useful, B, average, C, unnecessary, and D, zeros. So D is obviously going to be populated with units that a lot of people like because they can go somewhere if you pump a lot of effort into them, but it's just not for me. I was halfway considering putting, like, pre-promotes as S, or, like, necessary pre-promotes as S, unnecessary pre-promotes as A, and then, like, B, average, C, unnecessary units just in general. But then I was thinking about it, and there's units that belong in those tiers that aren't pre-promotes, so I was just like, I'm gonna just do this, because I think that this is all in all a better functional system. I'm kind of trying to make the tier list more interesting each and every time with, like, different ways that I rate the units, as well as different considerations I have, and based on the game, because each and every individual Fire Emblem game is different from one another. This is what a lot of people don't understand. When you compare, let's say, Thracia to FE8, and then you also compare that to, I don't know, Shadow Dragon, and then, like, Echoes, those games might as well not even be of the same series. They might as well not even be called Fire Emblem, because none of them really hold anything together. There are some functional features in some games that are alike, but for the most part, that's just not the case, right? But without further ado, it is time to begin my tier list and the rankings that I have. So very first on the list will be Lynn. She is, I would say, average. Lynn is a B tier unit. The only reason why she's not going in C tier or lower is because Lynn is necessary for the story. Obviously, she is not only necessary for the story, but she's one of your main Lord characters. It is kind of a bit abysmal, in my humble opinion, to have a main Lord and not train your main Lord. So in my particular case, I always train the lords of every game I play. There's never going to be a time where you're going to see me bench somebody like Lynn, even though you technically can bench her. The reason why is because she's a free deployment slot on pretty much most of the maps that she can take part in. And most of the maps she's able to take part in, she is force deployed, many of the maps. So you are literally having a dead character spot. And the issue with that is that some people will say, well, she's not worth training because she's not good. I'm not about to say that she's great or fantastic. I do think that her utility after promotion of being a bow unit as well as a sword unit, though there is no triple weapon effectiveness in this game, which is very unfortunate, is still very good, especially if you were to get her to S rank in bows for the Rhineflesh. I love that bow, and it's something that I think is part of her kit because I will use her. I do typically promote her first just because I do want to get the Rhineflesh. Don't always get it. But when I do, I'm capable of using an amazing bow. I wish that bow was actually like its supposed namesake. It's supposed to be a brave bow. How that bow is supposed to work, and I know this is a little bit of a side note here, but how it's supposed to work is it's supposed to take both of your attacks, if you double, and put them into one attack. So if you go first, you get both of your attacks first. It doesn't actually work like a brave bow. That's not how it's supposed to work according to the code. So if you don't double, you don't get 2 attacks with the weapon. And you only get 2 attacks once with the weapon, and those will just be in tandem. And the fact of the matter is it's basically like Adept, and then you just don't get another attack. So I think that would have been cool if that was the case. It's just not the case, unfortunately. It's so sad. It's so sad. I halfway want to say that what they were trying to do with that weapon was try to give it like a built-in Adept, because Adept doesn't exist in the FE GBA titles. I wish it did, because I think Adept is one of the series' best skills. I really do. A lot of people will say otherwise. I play too much of Thracia and Genealogy to really agree with that point. But Lynn overall goes into B tier. I struggle putting her in anything higher because her promotion isn't great, and I would, like I said, I would not say she's unnecessary because she is still a Lord unit, especially if you're playing Lynn mode. She is absolutely 100% necessary. I would say that if you're not taking into account Lynn mode, then maybe she's a C tier unit, because she's not unnecessary in either Hector or Eliwood's story, other than the maps that she's force deployed in, which there are a few. There are quite a few that she's force deployed in, so she is technically kind of not unnecessary in those chapters because she's there. She has to be used. She has to be utilized in some aspect, at least in my humble opinion. So in that case, overall, I would put her in B tier. I don't typically play Lynn mode, and when I do eventually get around to playing this game, I am going to play Lynn mode, and then I'll probably play the 2 other separate modes simultaneously. Or maybe not like simultaneously, but one after the other. So I'll maybe play Eliwood's mode first, then Hector's mode second. So I'll have like all 3 modes in a row, because very frankly, I think Hector's mode is the best. But the issue is that most people don't play Lynn mode. I don't particularly enjoy Lynn mode, but when I do play it, she is going to be absolutely necessary in the Lynn mode. In fact, I would dare say she is your most necessary character in Lynn mode, because there are characters that you can train, but even if you do train them, they're not really all that good. They're not going to take out somebody like Lundgren. I actually think she is the best unit for taking out the final boss of her own mode, and it just has to do with the Manikati. And if she's not trained, she can't even do that. So she's probably, in my humble opinion, the only unit that's decent to train in her own mode, which I think is intentional. I think the developers wanted her to be the forefront. Next is going to be Sane. So Sane is going to go into useful tier. Sane and Kent are both very, very good units. They are useful. If you promote them, they just become better Marcuses. And Marcus is an astonishing unit. The problem is that Sane and Kent don't start off that good, and if you don't play Lynn mode, they don't have the bonus of playing Lynn mode and getting that experience points. Plus, if you're playing Lynn mode on normal difficulty instead of easy, or I should say hard Lynn mode or whatever it is, the hardest difficulty of Lynn mode, you then get to use Wallace's promotion item for one of them. And I find this to be exceptionally good because then they can potentially be a match for Lundgren. It just depends on how much they have grown, how well they are. And besides that, you are early promoting, so they're not going to be as good as if they are promoted later on. But you have to early promote them if you want them promoted in Lynn's particular mode. I think they're both good. I think that this game in particular is probably one of the best games to be a paladin in. FE6 is also a decent game because both these games allow you to use swords, axes, and lances as a paladin, whereas in Sacred Stones you can only use swords and lances. And they did that for balancing reasons to give an advantage to Great Knights. I don't think it's enough of an advantage, though axes are very good in Sacred Stones. Lances are the best weapons in the GBA titles. So, grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter in Sacred Stones. But in this game, having the flexibility of all three weapons in the weapon triangle is actually pretty darn good. And because axes are such low rank for most of them, you really only need E and D tier. And you can get to like some good axes if you keep training them. But E tier is perfectly fine because you're going to get to use the best axe in the game, which is a hand axe. Hand axes are amazing. Not as good as javelins, but they are amazing because they allow you to have that weapon triangle advantage against your lance users. I think javelins are just all in all better because sword units are a little bit. I mean, you wouldn't use it on enemy phase, right, for just that. I just think javelins are better because they have better hit, particularly. Now, when it comes down to Florina, she's going into S tier. I think that she's a necessary unit. I don't think that she's combatively one of your better units in this game, even in Lyn mode. I just really don't. But there is so much darn utility that she provides. She is the first flyer you get until you get to Fiora. Fiora does not come until the Dread Isles. So we're talking around, I think it's chapter 19 is when she joins, or somewhere around that time. So you're playing 18 chapters of the game where you must use Florina, and she is your only flyer. I know that Heath joins at some point as well, so there is that. But the fact of the matter is that she is your only flyer for quite a while. And this is a very important facet of her because in Lyn mode, she is your only way to rescue drop over like the big mountain ranges that you have on certain maps and stuff like that. She is very useful. I wish she was a little bit better combatively, and they did give her better growth rates than you would see a typical Pegasus Knight in many of the other entries of the franchise. But she's still not really that great. Promotional gains aren't really that great for Falcon Knights in this game. Her con is very bad. And though a lot of people will say speed is more important than con, I do agree with that to some extent, especially for the female characters, because you actually don't want females in this game, especially those that can rescue, to have high con. You want them actually to have as low con as possible, so they have as high of an aid as possible. And, you know, some people will say that it's unfair that they have a different con amount base of 20 rather than 25 to determine aid and stuff like that. It makes a lot of sense, and the people who don't understand this are also the same people confused about biological fact. Unfortunately, men are bigger in stature. This is true regardless of generation, age, or time period. And understanding this means that it makes perfect sense as to why somebody like Florina would have lesser con, let alone the fact that regardless, once she does have enough speed, she's not really going to care about this. And that is the point. Once you have enough speed, the con problem really doesn't matter. You could have zero con and use most weapons to relative ease. And this is proven especially like in Thracia. There just comes a point in Thracia where regardless of the weight of your weapon, you're going to do good because you have grown to that point. So that is true. I don't think that con is better than speed, but I think con is still an important statistic. I don't understand why people minimize it just because it's not as good as speed. That'd be like saying skill is pointless because it's not as good as speed. Hello? You need skill in order to hit. Will. So Will is going to be going in D tier, along with Dorcas. So these two units are going immediately in D tier, and the reason why is because they're zeros. Both of them are zeros. Archers have it the worst in this game out of the entire franchise. Well, actually, no. I think they have it just as bad in Path of Radiance, because Path of Radiance also doesn't have triple weapon effectiveness, only double. So FE7 and FE9 are very weird cases where they both have only double weapon effectiveness, so archers are even worse in these two entries than they are in most other points in the game. In fact, the only reason why I rate some archers as decent in these particular games is just because I love their start, and I love some of the utility or story that they have along with them. Will has none of this. None of this, unfortunately. Not only does he have none of this, but he starts so low level, and if you don't play Lin mode, you have to wait several chapters before you get him in Eliwood or Hector mode, and he's so bad. If he hasn't had Lin mode to train, he's so bad. Dorcas kind of is the same thing. Dorcas actually has like decent growth all in all, but the problem is that he's going nowhere at the start. He's not very useful. The Axe Bros in this game are just not... They're just not good units. They're really just not good units. Sarah. Sarah is C tier. So I'm putting her in C tier because I feel like she is unnecessary. I think that healing in the early game, of course, being totally dominated by Sarah is very important because she's obviously better than a Vulnerary, especially if you were to have a Men's Staff on her. The problem is I believe the first Men's Staff you get is when you get Priscilla. And I just don't think that the healing that she provides for the early game is enough to boot her to anything above... Well, I guess average would be okay for her spot, right? Coming to think about it, I really do think that her healing is good. It is useful. It is necessary in some cases, but she is such a bad unit. Even trained, and it takes so long to train healers in these games. I hate what they did. They just butchered healing experience points because it can be abused. Have any of these people not seen like boss abuse before? You can play any one of these games and get any one of your characters to any level you want just by abusing a boss on a throne. It is so absolutely insane to me that healers were nerfed so bad from the Jugdral games to the GBA games. It's just disturbing. They get no experience for healing, virtually. It's 10 heals and then you're getting a level up. That's very quaint. It's like 8 or 9 heals and you're getting a level up with Men's Staff. What is that? What is that? You have to use an entire staff to get 2 levels? There are instances where you can use one single weapon use to KO one single enemy and you're getting a whole level up. Why? Why do healers get the short end of the stick on the experience points realm? Because she's such a low level, she has bad growth rates, and she's not really going anywhere. The only thing that I contribute to her being an average and not in C tier is just because she is your only healer until you get Priscilla. And it is actually kind of a fundamentally long period of time to wait, especially if you're playing Lin mode. Now, Urk is next. So Urk is a unit that I would say is deserving of A tier, only because he is your only relevant and good mage that you get for a good portion of the game, and he can become very good. He's useful because resistance is so low in this game on enemy units, especially in the early game, that his chip damage is insanely worthwhile. It's not like absolutely like a world break beater or world breaker or anything like that, but it is useful. absolutely useful. And if you do train him, he's the only Sage that you're going to get until you do get Pent. Now, most people will say that Pent's all in all just so much a better unit, but you don't get Pent until like the 20th chapter in this game. So that's not a viable reason to say that Urk is not a good unit, in my humble opinion. The very next unit I'm going to be rating is Wrath. So Wrath, in my humble opinion, is, I want to say he's a B tier unit. And part of the reason why that is because he has a decent promotion. He also gets swords upon promotion, so he won't be stuck to 2 range or bows at all times. Given that bows and 2 range are not good in this game as much as 1-2 range is, I would say he's useful for like chip, especially in the early game. Kind of like Urk, except I don't think he goes anywhere very useful. Because Urk, otherwise, when he promotes, he's not only going to have infinite 1-2 range attack that attacks on the lower defensive stat for most enemy units, he's also going to get staves, which is, though only E rank, still better than swords upon promotion. And though Wrath has more movement, I don't find that as important in the GBA titles as I find it in something like Thracia, the Jugdral games, or the Tellius games. And the reason why is because Canto only works in this game if you rescue or if you use a non-combative function. You can't even use it while using like a staff because that's still considered combative in some aspects, which is weird. You'd think that's weird, but it makes a lot of sense because if you use like a sleep staff, that's an attack. It might not be the same thing as KOing a unit with a weapon, but you might as well have KO'd that unit for 5 turns. And that can actually prove to be more valuable than even KOing a unit with a weapon. So, in my humble opinion, I really think that Wrath is average and nothing better. Matthew, however, is, I would say, necessary because there are a lot of things in this game that you want to steal and abscond from the enemies, and these things cannot be taken without Matthew until you get Legault, and Legault is also kind of a late join. They are your only 2 thieves in this game. And the problem is that I never promote these 2. Ever. I will never promote them because the moment that they promote, they no longer have the ability to use their thief skill because they turn into assassins. Assassins cannot steal, they get silencer instead. And not only can they not steal, they still have to use lockpicks. So it's not like you're getting like a rogue out of the situation. It's crazy because FE8 I feel did thieves much better with the rogue class because not only do rogues get to steal, but they also get to pick for free. They don't have to use things like lockpicks or chest keys or anything of that sort. But I still think he's very valuable. There are certain items in this game that can only be taken by Matthew, like for instance the silver card. That's very, very important, especially on a Hector hard mode playthrough because it's the only place that's available on. And I humbly think that item by itself is enough to put Matthew in S tier. Honestly, that item by itself is enough to put Matthew all the way up in S tier. Now, Nils. Nils is one of 2 dancers you receive in this game. Of course, he's going to go in immediate S tier. In fact, Ninian is going to just automatically join him. I know this is kind of jumping the gun a bit, but they're the same unit. They're functionally both the exact same unit. The only difference is the story. They share the exact same stats and growths. They trade each other's abilities as well as items and stuff like that per chapter that you're playing with them. So if you're playing in a chapter, you can only either have one or the other or neither, depending on whether or not they're available due to the story. And if you have the one, he will have all of the stats that you have accrued on either, and as well as the items and stuff like that. They're the same unit, virtually. Just story-wise, you have 2 dancers in this game. And what's cool about this is that dancers have extra utility in this game in the fact that though their best use is to dance and refresh a unit to move again, they also have things like Knitting's Grace, Thor's Ire, Set's Litany. All of these items are so powerful, so abysmally powerful. A lot of people underrate them. They'll say, well, they're just not anywhere near as powerful as the dance. I would say, like, if I was rating the abilities here, dance would go in S, and then all of those rings would go into either A or B tier. Most of them would go into A tier, especially Ninja's Grace and the one that increases like the attack of your unit. Those would go into A tier because those are just flat buffs. They go on top of the damage that you do. They ignore defense and resistance or terrain. Not only that, but they can even be abused. Ninja's Grace can just totally break the game. You ever wanted to play, because these are status ailments. You ever wanted to play where you're just going to play through the arena? This is one of my favorite games to play the arena in because of Ninja's Grace. And the reason why that is because if you use that on a unit, what you can do is go to the arena with that unit, fight in the arena, and then you can rescue that unit with a mounted unit. Then what you can do is you can drop that unit next turn. He will still have his status ailment because status ailments do not reduce in a rescued form. They just don't go down. Sleep, none of these things lower. And what's cool about that is that your unit can just be dropped off and then danced for and then go to the arena, then picked up, dropped off, danced for, go to the arena every single turn. You only have to use Ninja's Grace once to do this. Totally abusable, totally busted. Another underrated ability that this has is that it heals other status conditions, because you can only have one status condition on at a time in any Fire Emblem game. This is something to take note. So a perfect example of this is like if you're slept in a game and somebody uses a venom weapon and poisons you, the poison will overwrite the sleep. You'll no longer be slept, you'll just be poisoned. In this game, because all of the rings are status ailments, they go over things like sleep or silence. So if you have somebody silenced and you don't have any way to restore that silence, because let's say it's your only healer and she has your restore staff, you can just use one of the rings and immediately restore. This is kind of like less useful, obviously, than just using the rings for their notable purposes or just dancing with your unit. But in some occasional and very niche cases, it can be just a part of their utility. I love it because what it means is that dancers aren't just dancing in this game, in the sense that that's not the only thing they offer. Of course, if that was the only thing they offered, it would still be worth it. I'm not saying they need these other things to be good. These are gimmicks, these are niches, but they still are cool that they have them. Lucius is, I'm going to put in B tier. I think Lucius is actually a good unit trained, better than Urk, but you get Lucius a little bit later as well. Light magic is just much weaker in this game. Light magic is not an automatic good thing in FE7 or FE6. In fact, I would say it's actually kind of like the worst weapon type of the animatomes. And the reason why is they just have worse might and so on and so forth, all in all. I will, though, say if you get to A or S rank in light tomes, you can use some pretty busted tomes. So a perfect example of a pretty busted tome is something like Loose. Loose has 25 crit. It's basically a killer tome, and I don't think any tome comes near that close, except for maybe Luna. Luna is obviously like the best tome in the game, bar none, unfortunately. I wish it wasn't as powerful as it is, because it kind of just eclipses the need to have high magic and high tome might for like fighting other units, but so on and so forth. That's besides the point. Lucius is good, trained eventually. I think he's average. I think he's decent at start. I think he just has a little bit harder time doing meaningful damage because Thunder is just a better tome than anything that you're going to reasonably get with light tomes, especially because light tomes weigh so much at some point. So, grand scheme of things, I think he's good, average. I think he's just a little bit under Urk. Wallace, even if he has his force promotion, I think he is a D tier. He's a 0, and I don't even think he's a 0 that can be trained into a hero. Some of these units on this list who are going to be in D tier can. Wallace is not one of them. I would say that Wallace is very much one of the worst units that you get in this game, bar none. And the reason why that is because he's an Armor Knight, and you don't really need Armor Knights in this particular game. He's not a good one. He's not in a good position. He has a forced promotion that gives him good stats, of course, but the problem is that he misses out on growth for 10 whole levels, and he already has not so good growth and not so good bases. So unless you're playing on Lin mode, the hardest difficulty, you have to use that promotional item on him. But I will say that it is a good contribution when you don't have to use it. Elliewood is going to go into, I kind of want to say A tier, right? So some people would probably look at that as being kind of abysmal because Elliewood is not really great at start, especially because his rapier doesn't have triple effectiveness. But the thing is that once he promotes, and you can relatively promote him soon, especially if you're not playing Elliewood difficulty or Elliewood mode, he gets a mount and lances. And lances are, relatively speaking, the best physical weapon in the game. Javelins are one of the best weapons in the game. So I kind of want to put him in A tier. I know that he's more like a B tier unit, but for the sake of my own tier list, I think he's an A tier unit. Once he's promoted, I think he's B tier before then, because again, I'm not going to put the lures in unnecessary. I think that they are necessary, they are useful. If you're playing on Elliewood mode, he is like your most important character. If he dies, you get a game over, so on and so forth, blah, blah, blah. Some people will disagree with a lot of the units that I have on my list and where I put them, and that's okay. This is a subjective list. It's not as if I'm trying to say that these are objective standpoints, because objectivity versus subjectivity is a very interesting thing. A lot of people like to say, well, that's objectively wrong, or objectively this. Objective means fact. Subjective means opinion. They're just fancier words for those. It has to be fact that something is right or wrong in order for it to be objective. It cannot just be your opinion that it's objective. That's just not how that works. Like, for instance, it's objective fact that Marcus is a fantastic unit. And the reason why Marcus is going into S tier immediately is because he is probably the best pre-promote you get in this game. Probably. I would say maybe for sure. I would say the only units that give him a run for his money would be like Pent and Athos. But Pent, you get so late in the game, and Athos you literally get in the last chapter, whereas Marcus, you get him early game. You get him basically the start of both Elliewood and Hector modes. So the thing is that Marcus is good for the rest of the game. He's not as good as Seth, and I would more or less say he's like an Oify than a Seth. Definitely. He's more like an Oify. But he's actually very good because he can grow to some extent. He will keep up with your units all throughout the game. But even if you don't grow him at all, he's still useful to a certain extent for the rest of the game. He's not going to be like world beating, but he's still useful. Marcus just has so much utility. The rescue, the drop, how much movement he has, the fact that he has good weapon ranks in all his weapons. He doesn't even need to have a high axe rank because he doesn't have a high axe rank because hand axes are E rank. So he can just use that at base regardless. But he does have a fantastic lance rank and a decent sword rank. So what this means is that he can use pretty much any weapon that you want him to use with impunity. And this is awesome because he can use javelins, hand axes, he can have the weapon triangle at his disposal. He is just absolutely an astonishing and amazing unit. He deserves S tier along with everybody else who's there for various reasons. Lowen. A lot of people will say that he is as good as Sane and Kent. I don't agree. I think he has a little bit worse growth rates. I think he's a good unit, right? I think he's marginally not as good as them. I think he still belongs in the same tier because he is a Cavalier. When he promotes, he's basically going to become another Marcus. You could technically have 4 Marcuses on your team. at some point, and that's pretty notable. But man, I don't know that. So I don't think Lowen is as good as them because, for one, if you're playing Lin mode, Lowen is nowhere to be found, right? And for two, even though he is an earlier join on Eliwood and Hector mode, it's just the fact that you could use Lin mode and promote either Sane or Kent before you even start Eliwood or Hector modes that changes it, in my humble opinion. I think that really does change it. Again, granted, if you're not playing Lin mode, then you I would probably swap these two. I'd probably swap Sane and Kent with Lowen in their tier rankings. And there's probably people who would say, well, most people don't even play on Lin mode because Lin mode is boring, or Lin mode is this, or Lin mode is that. I'm rating these units on overall performance of the entirety of the game. So, because they have that option to them, and it's actually a very powerful option that Lowen does not have to his name, I think that has to be taken into account. All right, Rebecca, immediate D tier. Bartra, immediate D tier. Rebecca is worse than Will, joins later than Will. And that's kind of all that needs to be said about this girl. She's worse than Will, and she joins later than Will. She doesn't have as good a growth rates as Will. She's not as good as Will. Her con is bad. Her strength is kind of iffy. Bows are terrible. And not only are bows terrible, she just isn't going to go anywhere. Bartra is kind of the same situation. Bartra has such a low speed growth that he is likely not going to grow speed at all. He's not going to grow pretty much anywhere. Even if you train him, he's relatively never going to double. There is the fact that he is the only unit capable of recruiting Carla, and he can only do so if he's a level 5 trained warrior. But you can do this without necessarily using him, and you can just early promote him. I would say that Bartra is worse than Dorcas, and I would probably put Bartra in a lower tier if I had a lower tier, honestly. Hector. So Hector is also going to go into A tier, because though his promotion doesn't give him a mount, I actually think Hector is in the best position of all the lords in this entry at the start. And the reason why that is because he has access to immediate 1-2 range weapons in hand axes. They're not the best in the game, and his accuracy is kind of stuffy with it, but I think Hector's pretty good. He's got pretty fantastic growth rates, unlike Lin. So Lin gets 2 range upon promotion, but that 2 range is just specifically 2 range. Unlike Eliwood is better after promotion. Hector doesn't really improve after promotion. Swords don't really do much for him. He's already tanky as it is. And yes, his stats do improve. I'm not saying they don't improve, but his movement doesn't really improve. I'd say the most significant contribution that his promotion gives him is the 5 resistance that it gives him, which is pretty insane. Swords do give him the option to weapon triangle axes. Grand scheme of things, that does not matter at all. Typically, because these 3 units don't need an S rank in their respective, these 3 lords don't need an S rank in their respective weapons in order to use their preferential weapons, I typically just use the other weapon that they obtain after promotion primarily, just because it's fun. I like the different animations. I like the different options and stuff like that, just for fun. Because again, granted, Fire Emblem is all about it's a PvE game. It's single player. You're playing for fun. You're not just playing for efficiency at all instances. Alright, so very next unit I'm going to talk about is actually Oswin. I'm going to be putting Oswin in A tier. I'm actually going to move up Wallace to C tier. When I was thinking about it, Wallace makes for a good case of C tier, though I think he's one of the worst units in the game. He's actually really good in Lin mode for certain instances where you need a good tank, as well as the fact that if you do promote him, he's not good at fighting Lundgren, but he can help. And man, I gotta say, I think he is deserving of C tier. I don't think he's the as bad as somebody like Dorcas. I really don't. I was just looking at that and I was thinking, man, gamer man, what is wrong with you? Putting him in the same tier as Bartra and Dorcas, Will and Rebecca? Are you kidding? Even if he is an Armor Knight, and Armor Knights aren't that great in this game, except for Oswin. Oswin actually kind of throws a little bit of a wrench in that. Oswin is an early recruit in both Eliwood and Hector's modes, and he's actually good. He has good growth, good bases, and he is incredibly tanky, something you need, especially in the harder difficulties of FE7 at the start. He's not a unit that I typically keep around in my party or promote, but even if you don't, he can still perform some pretty reliably good functions, like, for instance, protecting Marcus, especially when Marcus is still a tent, so on and so forth, dealing with like rear reinforcements on certain chapters, particularly thinking of the chapter where you recruit Raven and re-recruit Lucius and defeat good old Bernard, if I'm not mistaken. I like leaving him behind because he's not going anywhere with his low movement anyhow, and if he's left behind, he can help take care of the straggling reinforcements that will absolutely kill Marcus, and that's not exactly what you want in that chapter. I think that Oswin is a good case for one of the better Armor Knights in the series, actually. Now, I say Armor Knights. I'm not talking about generals. I'm not talking about pre-promotes. Armor Knight. I think he is better than a unit like Dawson, for instance. He's better than a unit like Arden. I really do think he's one of the better Armor Knights in the series. I think he's better than even a unit like Gatry or Braum, especially Braum, or Meg. Oh my word, Meg. I think he's actually a pretty good unit. I think he's useful. I don't think he's necessary, and I don't think he fills like a gap that you can't possibly fill a little bit down the road, especially when you have Marcus. At the same time, you have Oswin. It's just that Oswin lifts some pressure from Marcus. Marcus can go do other things while Oswin's still tanking a point, right? Still a good unit. Guy. So a lot of people like to put him in like A tier or even S tier because he comes with Killing Edge. He's relatively decent combative unit. I don't think that Guy is good. I think he's average. Maybe I kind of want to put him in unnecessary, right? Because the thing is that the Killing Edge by this time is usable by any of your sword-wielding units, and especially Marcus. Marcus can use it better. I don't think that Guy is all that good with it. He needs to get a crit against most enemies to actually KO with it, whereas somebody like Marcus doesn't. I don't think that he is necessary. I don't even really think he's average. I think there are a lot of units that just provide more utility than just having one range swords, right? This is the problem, because he will promote into a swordsmaster. Swordsmasters are looked at as marginally a very good class in most of Fire Emblem because they get a lot of crit upon promotion, and then they not only have a lot of crit, but they can be pretty good at boss killing with stuff like the Armor Slayer and so on and so forth, usually the Longsword or something of that typical point, or the Lance Reaver, so on and so forth, Killing Edges. Guy doesn't really perform that function that well. He's got decent bases, decent growth, but outside of the Killing Edge, he's not really doing anything. Really, he's just not. Take the Killing Edge off of him when he arrives. Give him an Iron Sword and see how good he fares compared to the rest of your lords in the series. Lyn, Eliwood, he's going to be pretty much the same. The difference is they actually have utility that he doesn't. They're actually force deployed when he isn't. So they, in my humble opinion, are a little bit better, especially because you have to use them. And if you do use them, they have different niches that he will never have. Like, for instance, all your lords upon promotion, even if they didn't have it before promotion, get a ranged weapon. Marcus is going into S tier. So there's a lot of debate on whether or not Marcus counts as a unit in either FE6 or FE7, because in FE7 he doesn't take up a deployment slot at all. In FE6 he does, but in FE6 you still need him because he is your literal walking convoy. You don't have a convoy like FE8 where it's just automatic, and you don't have access to it without him. And it's just automatic with like units like Erica and Ephraim and FE8. You need him to be on the map in both FE6 and FE7. I think in FE7 he's better because obviously he doesn't take up a deployment slot. Of course, he starts as a tent, but if you have him promoted, which just takes him being deployed and surviving in so many chapters in a row, he will become a wagon. And once he becomes a wagon, I feel like his utility doubles because the wagon itself can follow your units. You don't have to go back to the convoy to take use of items. You don't have to have like really weird travel trains of like rescue, drop, and so on and so forth to get people to the convoy or out of the convoy or items to a different unit, this, that, and the other. So I think that him being like the first iteration of like the in-game convoy that's kind of like more accessible than something like Thracia, for instance. Like Genealogy has no convoy. You can send items to the convoy, you can't take them out unless you're in the home castle or in like one of the side castles. Whereas Thracia, you can put things in the convoy. Everything just goes into the convoy, but unless the chapter has a supply on it, which most chapters do not, by the way, you're not accessing the things mid-chapter. You have to be bringing stuff with you. So I think this is good. I think this is a good utility that he has that wasn't really accessible in previous games. And I think he's better than his iteration in FE6. So Priscilla is an A-tier unit. In my humble opinion, I think she's the best healer you have in this game, at least until you receive Pent. And even after you receive Pent, I typically still use her because she's mounted healing. Now, I'll use Sarah until I get Priscilla, and I'll usually use Sarah still when I need her after I've obtained Priscilla because healing is healing. But the fact of the matter is that mounted healing compared to dismounted healing, especially when neither one of them are getting any kind of like skill buff. Like bishops don't have Slayer in this game. There are no terrors or monsters like units in this game, so Slayer is just not a thing. Bishops don't have that. And because bishops don't have that, when she promotes, her combat is not going to be any better than Priscilla. And the problem is that Priscilla's mounted, so she has the utility of being mounted as well as healing. So even if you can't heal, you can rescue. You can do things like that and move. So I just think she has to go in A tier. A little bit of a hot take is Raven. So Raven is going to go into A tier. Raven is basically what Guy wishes he could be. He has much better bases, much better growth rates, as well as a much better promotion into hero, which allows him to have reliable 1-2 range in hand axes after promotion. This is pretty fantastic. This is very notable. And this makes Raven a very good unit. Raven doesn't have anything to speak of concerning defenses or luck for that matter, but once he gets, a support or two, he's not really going to be crit, as well as the fact that his defenses will be buffed in some supports. And regardless of that, he has a very good amount of HP, especially upon growing. And what you're really getting out of him is a good combat unit. He can eventually get to the point where he's dodgy to some extent, but because he never grows luck, really, he's never going to be that dodgy, because you need a combination of both speed and luck to be excessively dodgy. I actually think he's a fantastic unit, and I almost want to put him into necessary because of how powerful he can be, but at his start, he's not that powerful, so I think he's going to go into A tier. Canas. Canas is S tier. So the reason why Canas is S tier is because Luna exists. Luna is the best tome in this game. It's better than the S-rank tomes. It's better than every other tome in the game. It has 95 hit. It has 0 might, but it bypasses resistance. And it has, I think, 20 crit. It's actually insane, the stats that it has, because in no other game in the series does it have stats even remotely as close as it is. The only other dark magic user you get in this particular game, you do not receive, literally, do not receive until the last chapter. Canas is kind of an early game recruit, and because of how powerful Luna is, I would say that he is a necessary addition to your team. Do I always use him? No. But if you're going to take note of using dark magic and the qualities it has, especially after he becomes a druid and has access to staves as well as anima too. So you can use anima on him if you wanted. He's just a pretty darn fantastic unit. I definitely think he's the best of the starting magical units that you obtain. I think he's way better than Urk, and Urk is somewhat better than Lucius. I just feel like these units are weirdly balanced in such a way because of just the way that the tomes work. You would almost think that Lucius was the best because he has the best growth rates of these three, but the tomes that he has access to are just not that great. Urk has decent growth rates, passable. They're like middle of the road, but his tomes are only middle of the road. And then you have Canas, where his growth rates aren't the greatest. They're pretty much on par with Urk. Some are a little bit lower, some are a little bit higher. But the tomes he has access to are just insanity. Luna is insane. Nosferatu isn't so great in this game, but you can still do Nosferatu tanking, and it's still viable once you have a trained Canas. And that's something to take note of too, because he's the only one who can do that. Next, I have Dart. So Dart is going to go into C tier. I don't think he's as bad as the D tier units, but I think he's very unnecessary. He is a pirate, and the only pirate that you receive in this game, so he's the only unit in this game that can turn into a berserker upon promotion that has like the I want to say the generic and cool, still cool, animations and palette of the berserkers of FE6 and FE8. I love the way the berserkers look in FE6 and FE8. I actually think they're way cooler than the way Hawkeye looks in this game. But the problem is with using him, even though he can grow pretty well, he does have pretty good stats, and he will become a very good berserker, is that you have to use the Ocean Seal, which is a very expensive item. And like with the thieves in this game, now they have a much more expensive promotional item. I never promote him because I would rather just sell and have the gold. And then you have like the idea of a ranked run. If you're playing a ranked run, you would never promote this unit anyway because you're wasting a lot of gold and resources on a unit that's gonna marginally give you better combat than maybe somebody like Lowen, Sane, or Kent. I just don't find that to be all that good. Now he's not zero. He's not a zero. He's not a D tier. He's still usable. He's just not necessary. Fiora is next. So I'm going to put Fiora in B tier. The reason why Fiora doesn't go higher than this is because she's not that great of a unit, grand scheme of things. And not only is she not that great of a unit, she is not necessary for her flyer utility. She's a kind of a mid to late game join. She's more mid game join than late, but she's not necessary. Now, I will say that having 2 flyers is not a bad idea. Having more flyer utility is not bad. I'm not going to tell you that, use just 1 unit per class type and call it a day. I think it's actually smarter to use more of the best class in the game. But the problem is the best class in this game isn't the flyers. It's the paladins. So keeping that in mind, someone like Fiora is good, average, right? She's good, and she does have that flyer utility, but she doesn't have good growth. She doesn't have like good bases. She's not really going to go anywhere with combat. I don't think any of the Pegasus sisters really do. It's just more or less like her start as well as like her utility, and that's pretty much it. Legault is an instant A tier. The only reason why he's not getting S tier is because he is a little bit of a later join. However, I will say the Legault is like the only one of your thieves who's combatively viable as a thief. Now, if you promote either one into assassin, they're both going to end up becoming good regardless, but as a thief, as I play this game, I use both. I never promote either, so they stay thieves, and as thieves, Legault is actually still a pretty decent unit in combat. Are you going to use him for combat? Is that his main purpose? No. But I still think he's fairly good at that. He can do it. And he's all in all a better thief than Matthew. The difference is that Matthew is throughout all of the Lin mode, you get him, as well as he's a very early rejoin in Elliewood and Hector's mode, especially Hector mode. So I think that Matthew just deserves his S tier because stealing is just that important in this game. And because of that functional feature, he just doesn't get to go into the S tier like Matthew does. Isadora. Immediate A tier. She is the perfect example of a good pre-promote without being over-tuned. She has got good speed, good strength, decent skill, decent luck even, good growth rates. She's actually got better growth rates than Marcus. And she's got very good weapon ranks, which allow her to use very good weapons without having to worry about her con being so low, which is good because you actually want her con to be low because then she can rescue more units. And the fact of the matter is, with Isadora, there's a lot of misconceptions with this girl. Either she's really good because you take a look at her and you're like, yeah, she's got great stats for combat if you're using a silver sword, or she's really bad because her con's so low. I don't think either of these things are immediately. I think she's more of a debatable unit, right? I think she's useful. She doesn't go into necessary tier. She's not average, definitely not average. She's not as poor as somebody like Lin or anybody lower than that. But the issue is that a lot of people don't understand with this unit. You can use weapons to take full advantage of the weapon triangle. So she's always going to have some pretty decent dodge, especially with her better speed and luck. And not only that, she actually has access to weapons that are very strong that do not slow her down at all. Like, for instance, the Silver Sword, it weighs as much as her con. So she doesn't get slowed down by a weapon as the Silver Sword. So she's a perfectly good unit, viable when it comes to dealing very good damage and having very good speed. Her speed is notably much better than Marcus. Even by this point in the game, a trained Marcus will not have as good a speed as she does, and she has a very good speed growth, so she'll continue moving up in that. I feel like Isadora is a very good unit, and I actually think that if Isadora and Marcus were to trade places, I think I would put Marcus in B tier and Isadora in S. So what I mean by that is if Isadora was your Jagan-like character from the start, and Marcus joined when Isadora joins, I think Marcus would be a B tier unit. He wouldn't be an A tier. And she would just be an S tier regardless because she would be joining at that time and she would be a fantastic unit at that time, especially if she was granted something like the Silver Sword rather than the Silver Lance. So I think she's a very good unit. I just think you have to know how to use her and utilize her for her capabilities. And though she has bad con, this is actually functionally a good feature for female characters. You have to take this into account as well. Heath is next. Heath is the best flyer in this game. If it wasn't for the fact of his later than early join that he has, I would say that he's like one of the best units in the game. I think he's fantastic. I think he's very great. He's able to be promoted the moment that you get him. He is very powerful. He has got good growth rates. He's probably the only one of your earlier game joins for the flyers that has any kind of notable combat relative to his joining time as well as later on in the game. Even if you early promote him, he'll still be fine. He's actually typically underrated. A lot of people like to look at him and just say, well, he's not that good. I think after promotion, he is the only unit after promotion that can pick up a promoted Hector. I'm not too sure on that. I think Florina can still do it, but I'm not too sure. Either way, I know that he's got some utility in that. And I think he's an S tier unit. I think he's fantastic. Another A tier unit would be Hawkeye. Hawkeye is a pre-promoted berserker. And one of the reasons why I would never use Dart, because you get a pre-promoted berserker with very good stats, very decent growth rates, very good weapon ranks, as well as the fact that he doesn't need to be, you don't need to use an Ocean Seal on him. or any kind of seal, he's already pre-promoted. He's level 4 Berserker, and he has a lot of potential to grow into an even better monster than he already is. Giving him something like killer axes and hand axes, he's just a phenomenal, phenomenal combative unit. One of your betters in this particular game, in my humble opinion. I think he's a very great pre-promote. I just wish... I do like the fact that he has his own palette and his own animations, because they're trying to make him like this main character in the franchise, in that game. Alongside Pent, Louise, and the 3 main lords, I feel like these 6 characters are basically the main lords of this entry, which is kind of interesting to say, but I really feel like that. Athos too, so maybe like 7 main lords in this game. It's not really how that goes, but they all have like unique palettes and interesting looking animations, this, that, and the other, except for Pent and Louise. But Pent and Louise are just kind of like, I feel like they belong in that whole like amongst the lords archetype. They're just that important to the functional story, so on and so forth. Hawkeye is a great unit. I think anybody who rates him less than that is kind of missing the point on good pre-promotes. In fact, Geats is another one who goes into A tier. Useful, fantastic, amazing. I would say that he is one of the best pre-promotes in this game. He has B rank in axes, B rank in bows. He's the only pre-promote that you have that is capable of using the Brave Bow off rip, which is insane. Well, except for, well, there is one other, but, you know, we're getting to her soon. In this case, he's one of only 2 units that can use the Brave Bow off rip. And I feel like that gives him enough utility to boost him up into A tier. I would say that he's probably a B tier unit in some cases, just because you have to go to a worse chapter to recruit him. But your other option is Wallace, and Wallace is like, you might as well not be recruiting a unit on that chapter. He's just that bad, even if he's promoted. Even if you had to use the Master Seal on him, the Hero Crest or whatever, Knight's Crest he has to use. The fact of the matter is he's just not good. Geats, though, is a very worthy contender for a good unit in that vein. Like I said, you just have to go to a worse chapter. Pent is immediate S tier. Immediate S tier. He is one of, if not the best unit in this game. I think he's actually the best unit in this game. I think he's better than Marcus. The only thing that makes him worse than Marcus is the fact that he is a much later recruit. And the issue with that is that regardless of that, he still comes with an A rank in tomes and an A rank in staffs and can use pretty much anything in the game. There is no S rank staff in this game, so having an S rank in staves is pointless, so you would always want to get him an S rank in anima, which is totally fine. He can use anything. He can use any one of the combatively viable tomes that you can possibly think of for the anima ranks, as well as the fact that he can use any staff. He can use sleep, he can use berserk, he can use mend, heal, physic, fortify. All of these staves are open to him, and he uses them fantastically. He's got great bases, great growths. He has an automatic support, A rank support with Louise that gives him even more survivability than normal. He can just absolutely wreck everything with infinite 1-2 range. Thunder is his best tome. I don't care what anybody says, just throw a Thunder on him, maybe an Elfire if you need the damage, and he will do work. Louise is going to go into B tier. I kind of want to put her in A tier. The only reason why I'm not doing this is because she is a sniper. She's locked to bows. If she wasn't locked to bows, I think she would be worthy of A tier, because she's a good pre-promote. She's got good base stats. She's got good growth rates. She has that A rank support with Pent, and it's actually a very good support. Not to mention that she has the ability to use any bow in game, relatively speaking, except for the S rank bow. But she can get to that very easily. And when she does, it's a very powerful weapon for the final chapter. She's typically a mainstay on my team because I love her support with Pent, and I also love that she has a lot of resistance. So she's very, very adept at dealing with magical units, especially in certain chapters like for instance Pale Flower of Darkness, she can just sit on the outer walls and let all of the ranged units come and fight her while she's in range of Pent, and she has the support to survive. She has way more defense because of it, and she'll also just KO them all, especially with something like the Silver Killer Bow. I think she's a very good unit. It's just the problem of not having triple effectiveness and being locked to bows that keeps her out of A tier. Carl is a B tier unit. I think he is marginally better than somebody like Louise. And the reason why I say this is because you have to give him up, or you have to give up Harkin in order to get him. And Harkin, unfortunately, is just one of the better units in this game. He's one of the best combative units in this game physically. The only reason why he's going in A tier instead of S tier, even though most people would claim him to be an S tier unit, is just because he is such a late recruit in the game. Now, he is very powerful, especially if you're playing on the hard modes, Hector hard mode particularly, because he gets a lot of bonuses to his stats, relatively speaking. And he can become pretty much a powerhouse that just can strike blows with pretty much anyone. And I feel like Harkin is so much better than Carl that in order for you to recruit Carl, you have to be going out of your way to want a worse unit. You just have to. You literally have to be going out of your way. Now, the thing is Carl is still good, relatively speaking, because Carl is, he is a swords master with good crit, he's got good stats, he's got decent growths, and he's got good weapon ranks. But the problem is no 1-2 range this late in the game. He has basically no enemy phase. He's really only going to be a boss killer. Harkin does that better. Harkin with the Brave Sword is a way better unit than Karel with any weapon. You don't get the Brave Sword if you don't recruit Harkin, which is another interesting thing to take note of. Nino is immediate D tier. It's almost kind of pointless for me to have to explain why she's in D tier, but some people would want the explanation anyway. She is an incredibly late recruit. She has absolutely no viable redeeming qualities other than some good growth rates, but the problem is that she's going to be somebody that you have to raise with a whole lot of tediousness in order to get her. And that to me is an unfortunate, I just can't justify this unit. I don't think she's viable in this game. I think she's literally the perfect example of 0 to hero. She's not as bad, I would say, as some of the other zeros, like for instance Will and Rebecca, though they have much more time under their belt because she does have infinite 1-2 range weaponry, and she will get staves upon promotion. And when you do use her, she's actually very good. But the problem is that she's never going to be better than Pent. Pent starts good and has decent growth rates, and you have them for longer. It's one of these wild scenarios. It's sort of like getting Asbel and Thracia and then getting Miranda going B route and saying that she's a better unit than Asbel because of one thing or another. She's literally the same kind of situation, 0 to hero. She can be good. They both can be good. Nino can be good. But the issue is that there's the point of like availability. And I guess a better example of this would be saying like getting Nino or getting Miranda going B route and saying that she's good compared to Olwen, because Olwen is literally the same class. Olwen is the promoted version of Miranda, but you get Olwen several chapters before Miranda, and you have to go the inferior route to get Miranda. So it's kind of weird. It's kind of crazy. The next unit I'm going to rate is actually Farina. Farina is actually a pretty good unit. I would say she's A tier. She can promote instantly. She's got very good statistics compared to her siblings. She's actually, in my humble opinion, the best combative Pegasus Knight, but the problem is she's the latest join of them. And though she can pre-promote immediately, I don't think she's necessary. Having more flyers is definitely not a problem. In fact, this game is pretty generous with flyers. You get 5 whole flyers, which is pretty insane. You can use them all. 2 Wyvern Lords and 3 Falcon Knights, and you will have a stacked team of units that can just go everywhere at a whim. So I don't think that they're at all bad. In fact, I think even Fiora, who is what I've rated the worst in this game, I still think she's viable. Especially given the fact that bows only have double effectiveness, they're not so scared of bows in this game. So that is good for them, for the defensive sake. I do think that Farna is the best combatively, though. I actually think to an extent she's better than Heath, because she has like the resistance as well as the other good stats, whereas Heath is never going to have resistance to speak of. Jafar is going to go into B tier. B tier because he's just bad. He's just not great. He's an assassin, and of course he's got good bases. He's got, whatever. He can use good swords and stuff like that, but the problem is that he's not, in my humble opinion, any better than Karel. The only difference is that you don't have to trade a unit to get him, but he is such a late join, and he has such low caps concerning his strength and his other, defensive statistics that I would say that he's definitely inferior to somebody like Karel if you have recruited Karel, but then you have Harkin by this point. Harkin is far and away better. Far and away better. Silencer does not make up for this. Silencer is an interesting skill, but as I put it in Sacred Stones tier list, the issue is that Silencer is never going to be something I give assassins in the GBA games a buff for, or say that they deserve a higher tier, because they have to be using a killing weapon, like either a killing sword or a killing edge, good grief, or like a Shamshir, if they can even use it. I'm not entirely sure. I think they can. I think assassins can. Yeah, they can. And you have to be using one of those weapons and have to have a high crit against the enemy. Then it's only a 50% chance that Silencer will proc if you crit. So let's say you have a 20%, 30% chance to crit against your enemy. It's only a 15% chance that you're going to proc Silencer. That's not great. When you get to really high crit, like 50 plus, then it's okay, but it's still not great. There's going to be times where you just ting against an enemy. No damage, because assassins don't have good damage output, even with the better of the sword weapons, because their strength is so low. So, unfortunately, I have to put him in B tier. He's average. He's still, usable. He's still good. I would not say any unit in the average tier is just unusable. I don't even think people in C tier are unusable. In fact, I would say that no character in all of FE7 is unusable, period, because FE7 is a little bit more generous with how it does things for grinding and characters and stuff like that and so on and so forth. Leveling up, especially because a lot of the times you'll be fighting weaker pre-promotes or just weaker units in general. And what that entails is that means that most of your units are a little bit more lopsided towards S and A tier and even B tier. As you can see, C tier and D tier are almost non-populated. Speaking of another unit, Carla. Carla is going to go in C tier. She's unnecessary. She's an unnecessary recruit. By this time, you could already have Karel. You could already have Harkin. You could already have Jafar. And all of these units are better than her. She is basically just an Easter egg character, a little hidden, side character. You literally have to use a bad character and get him to a promoted level 5 warrior, Bartra, in order to recruit her. And you have to send him to the arena and have him talk to her. And he has to be able to survive a round of combat, but she also has to be able to survive a round of combat. And the game decides this through the RNG of their technical combat. And what's so weird about this is what this means is that these two units could technically kill each other and not recruit each other. Or you could actually fail this. Luckily, it's in a chapter where you could just instantly reset. So it's not the biggest of deals, but it is still something to take into account. I don't think she's a good character, but she's definitely better than the Zeros. Vida is next. So Vida is going to go into A tier. I actually think Renault is going to go into A tier as well. I might as well talk about both of them. They're both extreme late game units. Renault is not good combatively, though he can be decent combatively if you train his his light rank up to S. I kind of wish he had S rank to start with, because it would just immediately give him a lot more viability, because he would be able to use the Aureola without training. Because training him isn't that easy, considering the fact is that he only has 12 magic. I actually love Renault's design, because he was, doesn't matter what anybody says, he was a hero before he was a bishop, and that was his class. He had to have been. That's exactly what his stats show. 25 is the cap on strength for heroes, and he has exactly 12 magic. That's the magic that he would have if he was using a magical weapon like the Light Brand or the Rune Sword at range while being a hero. And then he has hero statistics with his defense, his skill, and his speed. The only thing that's not a hero statistic, well, he also has a hero statistic with his HP, is his resistance. He actually has basically a bishop statistic with this. I love this unit. I love his design. I love his staff rank, his light rank. He can get to Aureola, like I said, and once he does, he will have decent, not good, but decent combat with it, especially because he has very good con. He's the only one of your magical units in this game that has very good con, and I think he's a good unit. Does he replace somebody like Pent? No, but is he a good substitute, or not really substitute, but is he good in conjunction with Pent? Yes, absolutely. I think he's a fantastic unit. He's just too late of a game join, too late of a join in the game to be an S rank unit, an S tier unit particularly. Now Vida is a pretty much just as late of a join as Renault. I think she joins a chapter sooner. Vida is the strongest combative flyer you get in this game. She is this game's Har. She is this game's Dean. The only thing is, though, is she joins much later than either Har or Dean in any of their respective games. But even with that being said, she has insanely good stats. And I absolutely love this unit. I typically do use her on occasion when I'm not using other flyers, or if I already have or if I have space for her, because she's a fun unit. I think she's very good at base. Now, concerning Athos is going to be my last S tier unit, and the last unit I rate. A lot of people would probably say that this is kind of a bit weird, because he literally only joins in one chapter. But the man is an art sage. He is a class all his own. He's basically a lord, just like Hawkeye technically is, as well as the three main lords in the game. They all have classes that are their own. He has an S rank in light, dark, anima, and staves. He can use every tome and every staff in the game out of the gate. He has the best statistics of any of your magic units possible. He has the best defense. He has very good HP. He has very good magic. He doesn't need to grow any because he's capped level 20. He has no growth rates to speak of that are worthwhile or even to know, because I'm pretty sure his growth rates are 0%. This is something that the developers decided to do for pre-promotes that are already maxed level for basically the rest of the game, or the rest of the entries after Thracia, and I don't like this. I love how that Galzus has growth rates you can actually see in game. He has growth rates even though he's capped. He's level 20, because then you can see how did he get there. It's just like a cool concept, right? Just seeing that, just knowing that. Is it necessary? No, because unless you get into the code, you're not seeing it. Fire Emblem has never given you the option of being able to see growth rates outside of going into the code or patch, or some kind of patch or hack or something of that nature. So it doesn't really matter. I just wish it was not a thing they got rid of. Because I find it interesting. He is combatively your best unit in the final chapter. It doesn't matter who you've raised, doesn't matter how good that unit is, it doesn't matter what weapons you're using. Athos is your best unit in this game combatively. He's also your best unit in this game magically, and your best unit in this game utility-wise in that chapter. So though he's not available until that chapter. I think that he kind of substantiates his S rank by himself. I do have to say though, one of the reasons why I don't always use Canas is because though Luna is very useful for all the chapters beforehand when you have Canas, the only time that I ever feel that Luna is absolutely necessary in this game is when you're playing the final chapter. It's the only time I ever feel that it is 100% necessary. Every time before then, it's a good boon. It's good. It's useful. It's good utility. So, grand scheme of things, you could have 2 Luna users in the final chapter, and that's perfectly fine. That's wonderful. I'm glad for you if you do that. But there are times where I just bench Canas and don't use him, even if I recruit him at all, and just say, okay, when I get to the final chapter, I'm going to have a Luna user with no investment, and he's going to be better than Canas even with max investment. So I'm not discounting Canas because Canas is still an S tier. Absolutely, he's still an S tier because he's the only dark magic user you have for the entire game until the last chapter, basically. So that in mind, there's a little bit of that dichotomy there because there's always that debate: is Canas good if Athos exists? And I think that answer is yes. But Athos is also good, regardless of anybody else existing, even Pent. So this is my FE7 Blazing Sword tier list in its full entirety. I think there's room for improvement on this. Just like how earlier I took Wallace and said, is he really a 0 unit? And my answer was, nah, he can't be as bad as Bartra, Dorcas, and Nino and such. So I put him in C tier. Still not a unit I would ever use, but taking a look at it less biased and less subjectively, I put him there. It's funny too because I actually love Armor Knights. I am a huge fan of good armors in the series. The problem is that there's so few. The only ones that I can particularly think of are Tyronio and Path of Radiance, and Xavier and FE5, and that's pretty much it. I don't think that Gatry is pretty good in Path of Radiance too. I wouldn't say he's great. The other Armor Knights, pretty much every Armor Knight that is already promoted is decent in Radiant Dawn. The problem is that Radiant Dawn doesn't favor that type of unit at all, and because of that, they're not really on my radar. They're not on the same level of good as like Tyronio and Path of Radiance, especially because Resolve is actually good in Path of Radiance compared to Radiant Dawn, where it's still good, especially because it can help you proc other skills and abilities, but it's just not that good. So it's unfortunate that like most of the other franchise armors are not that great. Oswin is kind of a little bit of a outlier for the GBA games, especially because otherwise there is no Armor Knight that I would use in any of the GBA games. Long term, that is. But that's everything. I want to thank you for joining me. If you like my content, please upvote and follow, or like and subscribe, depending on your platform of choice. Leave a comment down below. Tell me about your list, your opinions concerning my list, and what you would do with some of your favorite units. Because I know that there's probably going to be people out there that absolutely love Nino, or absolutely love Wrath, or absolutely cannot stand Vita, or think that Athos is entirely overrated. And that's perfectly fine. I welcome the challenge and the opinions and the differences between ideas behind tier lists like this throughout the good part of Fire Emblem community, right? Because that's just the reality of it. We're playing a PvE game. We're not playing PvP. We're not fighting against each other. It's single player. Many of the ideas behind what makes a good unit can be entirely changeable. And with that being said, I will see you all soon. May you have a great and glorious day gaming.